This is video 18. We had covered up to slide 111 and we'll pick up from slide 112. This is Coronavirus Pandemic Terminator series. This is Coronavirus Pandemic Terminator Talk series, and we'll go back to slide 111. This is just a brief summary. I had mentioned that I do not have rich pedigree, and again, I have no jealousy against people who have rich pedigree. But without rich pedigree, rich friends or relatives, it's hard to bring your ideas into fruition. And that's why I've had zero success in the past. And I have, at least in my mind, I've thought that I have had quite a few good ideas that could improve the lives of fellow Americans. But unfortunately have made zero progress in that so far. And then few humorous ideas came to my mind for getting funding for my ideas. One of them was robbing a bank. Again, robbing a bank with a gun really doesn't get you much money. You get a couple $1,000s. And so I quickly dropped that idea. And I learned that robbing a bank from the inside is a lot more productive if you're the president of a bank. You can haggle and finagle billions of dollars without anybody knowing. And that seems like a lot more productive idea rather than wearing a robber suit. And those of you who remember 1980s market crash, 1987 market crash in the fall of 1987. The reason it's so vivid in my mind is friends of ours owned Ramada Inn at the airport, and a US Air Force plane whose engines failed crashed into the Ramada Inn, and I was there to be suboptimally of whatever limited help I could provide at a Red Cross center. And the TV monitors were showing these ticker symbols of Dow losing value, and then as time went on, I learned the savings and loan crisis. And during that savings and loan crisis, the crisis came because higher management of these savings and loan institutions was loaning money to their friends where the money was not going to come back, and that precipitated the savings and loan crisis. And this is not something that happened only in 1980s. Recently, the Wells Fargo bank's upper management decided to pressure their workforce into opening bogus accounts on the names of clients. And the whole idea was to open bogus accounts, increase the revenue, and get bonuses and cash in their stock options. So again, it's kind of hard at my age, after spending my entire adult life to become a doctor and practicing medicine, hard to become a bank president, to rob it from the inside. So unfortunately, I dropped that idea also, thought that was a bad idea. But again, my observations are robbing a bank from the inside is a lot more productive than with the guns. Before going public, I wanted to do everything I could internally, make all the efforts with my scientific thinking and the scientific flaw, the scientific blind spot in the advice that was being given to the general public and healthcare workers. And I came into adulthood during AIDS pandemic. And I've taken care of patients who died under my care from AIDS in the late 1980s and early 90s. And then I was involved in planning for anthrax preparation in our locality during the 2001-2002 time frame, when anthrax terrorism letters were being mailed to all kinds of people. And I had read thousands of scientific articles on the subjects of epidemics, pandemics, and so on and so forth. And my colleagues nationally have published many, many elegant scientific articles on coronavirus, not the present COVID-19, but the ones before that on SARS and MERS. from pharmaceutical companies' point of view, business model never made quite business sense to come up with pharmaceutical products against these different coronaviruses, including SARS and MERS. And of course, that's where the government steps in. Agencies like NIH, NIAID always have to prioritize on where they spend their limited resources. And other coronaviruses like SARS and MERS were never a high priority. And those epidemics were far away and were never high enough on the priority. So no funding was obtained by colleagues. So the point I'm making is, in the past, when there were decades of warning, no funding could be obtained. And when we're in the middle of it, you can't get anybody's attention. And unfortunately, that's the way the world works. So again, before going public with my insight into the scientific blind spot based on which advice was being given, and I thought I have unique insights. So I made lots of attempts to try to get internally these agencies to keep their scientific blind spots in mind before giving public advice. But however, I found no one is really listening of a different perspective. So I could, so I contacted many people, and below is a list of the people I contacted. First, of course, I contacted my colleagues locally, and many of them have expressed equal amount of frustration with the bureaucratic thinking, and that doesn't really want a different perspective. And then I thought, well, you know, there are, Dr. Fauci is one of those highly respected colleagues, and I have sat in his lectures, and I have tremendous amount of respect for him, but he's also extremely busy in the middle of this pandemic, so I don't expect him to have time for somebody like me. But I thought surely somebody in his hierarchy of his assistants, somebody would be able to read my email. So I sent this following email to Dr. Fauci. Dear Dr. Fauci, I am a general internist trained at Indiana University Medical Center, currently practicing at Indianapolis, Indiana. I had noticed a blind spot in our scientific thinking for over 30 years, since the day of AIDS epidemic, in how we manage airborne illnesses, especially viral illnesses. Now, in light of the current coronavirus pandemic, that flaw or blind spot is going to cause unnecessary morbidity, mortality, which means suffering and death, and is making our economy collapse. When the viral particles have contaminated all indoor air, face, eyes, nose, all becomes infected, contaminated. All the present masks, surgical masks, N95, which are in short supply anyways, and other protective equipment is really not protective when you are standing in the midst of indoor contaminated air. Good news is that PAPR, powered air purifying respirators, are already available. Using those industrial use PAPRs, we send people into toxic industrial environments all the time. As you already know, toxic gas particles are much smaller than viral particles, and we need to deploy these to allow people to go back to work. This is off-the-shelf technology to solve the current crisis. In the middle of the coronavirus crisis, I'm trying to assemble a team of diverse professionals to educate health professionals, educators, leaders like you about the blind spot in our current scientific guidelines being given to healthcare workers and general public. Once the new scientific paradigm is accepted to have the new PAPRs available to everyone who desires, there's not enough global supply of PAPRs, and we are going to need greater than 2 billion of these units, in my estimation, in the next 24 months to prevent global economy from collapsing. This is going to be a greater than $100 billion industry, creating manufacturing jobs. If we don't deploy this new technology, our economy is going to collapse. Please feel free to call my cell phone for any questions, and I would be happy to share my perspective, which is a little different than the standard guidelines. Thanks for your willingness to read a little different perspective. Thanks, Dr. Vipin Kalia. Of course, I also, I'm not faulting Dr. Fauci. He probably doesn't read his own emails. He probably has assistants, and they probably get thousands of emails. So my email probably got in the middle of it. However, I wanted to internally see if I could get somebody's attention. Then I sent my email to Dr. Redfield from CDC. Again, no response from there. And then to Secretary Azar of Health and Human Services. Again, no response from there. Then to Secretary Ben Carson of Housing and Urban Development, and he is a physician and a neurosurgeon. So I thought certainly would be worth trying that. Again, no response from there. And I also realize all these people are busy and they have thousands of tasks overloading them. So I'm not begrudging them not answering my emails or calling me or even having somebody else call them. But my scientific colleagues, I wanted to challenge the 6 feet model that was developed in the 1940s. And there have been many of my scientific colleagues who have published hundreds of articles in the last 60 years and have never gotten any traction in the past either to alter this standard flawed model. And these are prestigious colleagues from prestigious universities like Harvard and other prestigious universities who have published many scientific articles since 2001 about coronavirus and also have gotten zero attention. So right now it's excusable that all these advisors of these higher up agencies are busy, but in the past, in the last 60 years, it was not like these scientific colleagues who published these articles in prestigious journals got any attention either. So that's unfortunately how the way life works. And here is a copy of the email I sent to Dr. Fauci, Dr. Redfield, Secretary Azaz, Secretary Azar, and also to Secretary Ben Carson. And again, I fully expect these people to be busy and not necessarily get to me, but I thought maybe one of their assistants who reads these emails, maybe they do, and maybe they hit just a mass delete button. If they do, maybe they'll forward to the correct person. So since this has already been 13 minutes, so we'll go a little more longer since I'm on the same topic. So then I thought, well, I'm not getting anybody's attention on a national basis. So let me try to get attention. I live in Indiana. So let me try to get attention of the people in Indiana. And of course, the top person in Indiana is Indiana's governor. And sending email to Indiana's governor is about as useful, or calls to their office is about as useful as trying to call Secretary Fauci or sending him. Not Secretary Dr. Fauci or Secretary Azar. So I thought, let me go ahead and go in person to the governor's office or Indiana State Department of Health or the mayor's office. So what I did was during lunchtime, and of course, as you would all know, near governor's office, state offices, parking is not easy. So during lunchtime, I thought instead of me driving over there trying to look for parking, since I only had limited amount of time, so I drove my car, parked it somewhere near in a public place, took Uber from there, went to the Indiana governor's office, went to the secretary, went in through security clearance as all people should, and I had no begrudge on that. Went into the secretary, Indiana governor's secretary's office, and explained to the receptionist and or his secretary that this is who I am and this is my intention. Could you please hand deliver this to not necessarily the Indiana's governor, he's a political person, but to his healthcare people who are advising him on healthcare issues, and see if they see any merit in my thinking. And again, I haven't heard anything back. So then I thought the scientific people in who are advising the governor are Indiana State Department of Health. Again, I took Uber during lunchtime, went to Indiana State Department of Health, and also hand deliver the letter. And fortunately, I did have some connections with the director of Indiana State Department of Health. and was able to get that same email that you saw on slide number 116 to her office. Again, have not heard anything useful in terms of feedback. And same way, I tried to get hold of the mayor of Indianapolis. Again, doing that in the middle of a pandemic through email and telephone is about as useless as any other activity. So I hand delivered that to the security guard sitting outside the mayor's office. And he promised me he would deliver it to the mayor. And again, I don't expect the mayor to understand these kind of technical things, but I thought he would have somebody in his team who would be able to understand the scientific quandrum, a scientific quandary that we are in, based on which we are giving advice. And fortunately, I did have access to one or two physicians and or scientists who are advising the governor, and I did talk to them and told them to pass my concerns to the Indiana state governor. And unfortunately, I was not able to make any progress there either. For the time being, this videotape has become about 17 minutes long. So I'm going to wind down here at slide number 117, and we'll pick up from here. From slide 117, I'll recap in the next video. So we're going to wind down this for the timing, and we'll catch up in a minute.